G'day Bomber fans, Zach Merrett is staying put at the Bombers. Hawthorn and Essendon failed to get a trade done. It feels like a big lose-lose situation for both these clubs. In an ideal world, Merrett goes, we get good compensation, but unfortunately we weren't dealing with Gold Coast, we weren't dealing with Sydney, we had the Hawks and their draft hand, which everybody said from the get-go, we've been saying this for weeks, it would never be enough to offer up a fair trade for Merrett, and, whereas the Bombers wanted established young players in the trade as well, the Hawks didn't want to get it done. If I'm being honest, guys, I think Hawthorn have had a little bit of a shocker here. I know I'm an Essendon fan, so it's probably biased, but it was a disappointing end to a fun trade period. The drama was high. There was lots going on. I never thought a trade would get done, but I hoped, seeing Hawthorn do their business last year with Tom Barrass and how clever they were, that they would, find something late. And in the end, it just felt a bit lazy and half-assed. I'll maybe go into more detail another time, but first we're going to look at what Hawthorn offered us and why the Bombers were right to say no. But yeah, as I've said pretty much the whole time, a trade was always going to be too difficult to get done. I've always thought that a straight Essendon and Hawthorn negotiation was not going to work. I've said that from the get-go. I've always thought Merrett would stay. And, if Hawthorn weren't willing to put players on the table or involve other teams, it was never going to happen, and they didn't do that. So let's look at Hawthorn's offer and chat about why it was brushed off by Rosa and his crew. So Hawthorn put forward two offers to Essendon. The first one was really not much different to this one, so I'm not going to go over it too much. The second offer that they put forward and the final offer, well, they'd gone out of their way a little bit to improve their draft hand. Not really, not heaps. They offered up pick 10 and 22. They got both of them from Carlton for pick 9. So 10 and 22, a future first for next year, and Henry Hustwaite. And in return, we give Zach Merrett and a future third for next year. So that is the trade offer. On paper, it's a good trade. Lots of good high picks involved, you could say. There are three first rounders. That sounds good. I actually think for what Hawthorn have to offer, it is sizable. They're giving away a lot of their draft capital. The issue is they don't have valuable draft capital to give away. So yes, it's a lot for them, but it's not a lot for us. And if we go through asset by asset, it kind of paints a picture. So pick 10, that is the centerpiece. It's a good pick, but the Bombers already have picks 5 and 6 in this draft, and we're going to use those picks in the 20s to try and go up the order anyway. If pick 10 is the centerpiece, it's a pretty ugly one. The Bombers don't need it. We might want it, but we don't need it if we're being realistic. It would have been handy, is my view. Pick 22, that would have been traded away to prepare for an Adam Swade bid, so we wouldn't even use it. The future first, if Merrett's at Hawthorn, I'd say they're a sure thing for top 4, so that's a pick near the 20s. And Henry Hustwaite, the first offer that the Hawks put forward, they offered up the choice of Henry Hustwaite or pick 62, so that is his value kind of summed up there. He's a player in the 60s. So yes, it's a lot for Hawthorn, but what would that trade actually give Essendon? I think the first half of the trade, the fact that Hawthorn are giving up a lot is a tick. They are giving up a lot to get Zach Merrett. But if we accepted this trade, how does it help us going forward? So it gives us a bunch of picks in the 20s. It gives us a high selection that would fall 2 picks after what we already have in this year's draft. I think this is a classic example of Hawthorn giving up what they think is fair value for them to give up without attempting to understand what the Bombers actually want in a trade. We were clear what we wanted. We wanted established young players or lots of draft capital. We actually sent back a revised offer, the same as what they put forward, but with an extra first rounder for 2027, and the Hawks rightfully rejected that. It would have been overs for Merrett. But even that trade, that would have been hard to sell for the fan base because, you're not guaranteeing yourself a good shot at a Merrett-like player. Merrett is one of the best midfielders in the league. If you told me I can have a go at picking 3 or 4 young players in the 20s in a draft, or Zach Merrett, I'm choosing Zach Merrett. And this is why Hawthorn was so silly to think they could get it done on their own. We've said this the whole time. They simply never had enough to offer us in terms of draft capital on their own. And they were never willing to put players on the trade table. Even if they were, they left it until far too late to do so. Their first offer was on deadline eve, and after that they waited a week to get that across. They then set the Dons a deadline to respond to it for. It's an odd tactic to put in place when you're attempting to have a negotiation with a club for their best player. That to me felt like a pissing contest rather than an actual negotiation, and that's the way this trade kind of played out. It was more of a power move from both clubs, Essendon as well. I'm not just criticising Hawthorn here. Essendon were very stubborn, whereas other clubs in their trade negotiations, they just went about their business and got it done. So if we're looking at what Essendon would be thinking about in a trade for Merrett, because picks in the 20s doesn't cut it. If you're a Hawthorn fan, you might think so. That's fair. go for it. But a trade goes two ways. The Bombers don't need to accept a trade because Hawks think it's fair. They don't even need to negotiate for a trade with a contracted player. But what would have convinced Essendon to let Merrett go? I think the thing that interests me is looking at Hawthorn's business last year with Barras. They were so quick to make pick 14, 3 selections to entice West Coast, and they did. They actually improved what they had to get it done. So why weren't they willing to really do that in a big way with us? If I'm Hawthorn, I'm thinking about what Essendon would say yes to. I'm not thinking about what we can give across. I'm thinking about what Essendon would say yes to. And the things that I would say yes to as an Essendon fan are Hawthorn helping us move up the draft order. That's where a 3-way trade would come in, Could Hawthorn try and help us get pick 1 or 2 or 3 or 4? That would be a lot more valuable than picks in the 20s. Established players, not just Cam McKenzie from Hawthorn, although that is a good option, but even, a Zane Dersma from another club. If Hawthorn could help us get Zane Dersma, a player that we like, without us needing to give away draft picks, that would take away the need for a couple of those future picks that they put on the table anyway. There are so many creative things that Hawthorn could have done to get a trade over the line, involving other clubs, involving, some creativity with their list, but they weren't willing to do so. They waited until the second to last day of the trade period and gave us what they had at their disposal. If I go and buy Coke and someone comes up to me and offers me $5 to take it off my hands, I'm not saying yes. Yes, it's fair value to them. It's $5 for a Coke. I need more compensation than that. I don't want to walk back to the store and get another Coke. I need, $5 and a lollipop. I don't know. What I'm saying is, it doesn't matter what Hawthorn thinks is fair in this negotiation. It really does not matter at all, because there's one team that needs to say yes to this trade, and it's Essendon. They simply have to pay up and hope it sticks. They really didn't have enough to do so. Those who think the Bombers missed the mark by not accepting this deal, I think we would have missed the mark by saying yes to it. And that's coming from someone who wanted Merrett to be traded. I'm disappointed that the trade didn't get done. I think there was a world where we trade Merrett, get something great in return, but this offer wasn't great. I thought it was good, but it wasn't great. And trading away a club captain and probably a club legend for a good offer just doesn't cut it. That is not a good message to send to the fans. And if I'm Merrett, by the way, I was thinking about this, because he's a footy nerd. He is across this all. He would know what his value is. He would know that Essendon weren't going to accept that offer. I'm pretty filthy with Hawthorn, because it just felt like a lazy trade negotiation, a lazy trade offer. It felt like they put everything together last minute. Yes, there was a lot involved in it, but it's not something we're going to say yes to, because it's not something we want. They put all in that effort in for Barras and half-assed it with Merrett a bit. They had a really good chance to get Merrett, go for a flag. There was definitely a trade there to be done. The Bombers said no throughout the whole thing, but negotiated it on deadline. There was always a trade possible, and I said that the whole way through, but I thought Hawthorn blew it. I think we were stubborn and childish in this as well, but Hawthorn were the ones who needed to pay up for a contracted player, and they failed to do so. Let's hope for them it's a Josh Dunkley 2.0, because, we've been burnt by being in Hawthorn's shoes a bit. It doesn't feel good, and their fans, by the way, don't know how long this will last, but I'm seeing quite a few annoyed at their own club for the way they handled it. They had a bit of a stinker, in my opinion, Hawthorn. I also look at Sydney and Carlton, Sydney and Gold Coast, because they were in similar deals with Petrarca and Curnow, and those deals were clever, they were creative, they were thought through. They're almost win-wins. If Essendon had been dealing with Sydney or Gold Coast, Merrett probably wouldn't be in the club anymore. That is the fact. Merrett wouldn't be at Essendon if he had requested a trade to Sydney or Gold Coast. I look at what Melbourne got for Petrarca. They got picks 7, 8, and a future first, with other things being thrown around late as well. But those centerpieces are much better than ours. And if that was offered to us, I'd be more than happy with the club sending away second rounders to get it done. That is great value and a great asset. Carlton and Sydney. Carlton wanted players, and look what happened. They get a near 200 gamer in Will Hayward and 3 first rounders, whereas we're being offered, Henry Hustwaite, someone who's worth pick 62. Those are deals that actually involve both teams getting creative, trying to work out a fair price. It involved both clubs giving up a bit because they were in open communications and wanted the best outcome. If we were trading with Sydney or Gold Coast, we get that deal 100%. And those are good deals to look at how, to show how far off the Hawthorn one was. Because aside from pick 10, there really isn't anything of note in that trade. And you could argue pick 10 isn't really of note. You can argue pick 22 is a second rounder. That's technically a first rounder, yes, but let's be real, it is junk. We wouldn't even use it. It would be the 5th highest pick in our hand if we accepted it, and we wouldn't even, be able to use it. So, as bad as I wanted a trade done, as much as I wanted to see the Bombers compensated for Merrett and get a big bonus, I do think we did the right thing by declining this. I thought, I think we would have looked a lot more sillier if we had said yes to this trade. I know that the next few months and even next season are going to be really awkward with Merrett, and we're probably going to go through this again in the 2026 off-season. And I get that it looks like we're refusing to trade a player that wants out, but I personally don't see it like that. I thought we negotiated, we were talking to Pretoria all day, we sent back a counter offer, one that they rejected as well. You know, you can't say that the Hawthorn offer is fair and the Essendon offer isn't, because it's Essendon who's deciding what is fair for Zach Merrett. I thought there was always room for a trade, but in the end, you know, one that came was never fair. And that's the simplest way to put this. These teams just weren't able to see eye to eye and agree on what a fair trade was. Maybe if Hawthorn had put in more effort and left themselves with more of a runway and not, you know, one day of negotiating and involved other teams, they could have got a trade done, but they didn't do that, so we are stuck with Zach Merrett for 2026. So let me know what you think down below. Give me your thoughts. I'm sure I'll have plenty more out about this to come, but for now, I'm going to go have a nap. It's been a long day, long week. I'm going to have a well-earned nap, I think. Cheers for watching, Bomber fans. Like, subscribe, and go Bombers.